Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to the Artsy Raven. Today, our special guest is Anthony Bidulka. In 1999, Anthony left a professional accounting career to pursue writing and never looked back. He's dedicated his career to writing traditional genre novels in an untraditional way, developing a body of work that often features his Saskatchewan roots and underrepresented, diverse main characters. He tells serious stories in accessible, entertaining, often humorous ways. His books have been shortlisted for Crime Writers of Canada Awards of Excellence, Saskatchewan Book Awards, a ReLit Award, and Lambda Literary Awards. His book Flight of Aquavit was awarded the Lambda Literary Award for Best Men's Mystery. I didn't know they had men's mystery, but all right. Making him the first Canadian to win in that category. Going to Beautiful won an independent publisher book award, being named Gold Medalist as the 2023 Canada West Best Overall Fiction Novel, and was awarded the Crime Writers of Canada Award of Excellence as Canada's Best Crime Novel for 2023. So welcome, Anthony.
Thank you. Thanks for that nice introduction.
Now, I know a lot of rich accountants, so I don't know. So are you like you've not done any more accounting after you started writing, or what's happening here?
You asking if I'm a rich accountant. Yeah, so for those people who don't know, I actually began my professional career as a CPA, and I worked with a large firm called Ernst & Young, which is an audit. And I was about 10 years into that career when I decided to make the leap of faith to start writing. And I don't know if I suggest this to other people, but I basically quit my job.
Mm-hmm.
There was no buffer period in between. And I do a little bit of accounting for family and friends, but generally I work full time as a writer and have done that for the last, 20 plus years.
Yeah, you've done well. I was looking at all these awards that you've been nominated and you've won. So obviously, you've been building a following.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate, and I think part of it for me always has been that my definition of success as a writer has changed depending on what stage I'm at. So when I left my career as an accountant and thought I at least have to give this a shot, success for me wasn't necessarily even getting published or selling a million copies of my book. Success at that point, at that early stage, was giving it a try. That knowing that, someday, even if I had to go back to being an accountant, I could look back on my life and go like, oh, wasn't that fun? I took that, 16 months off and tried to be a writer, and good for you for giving that a go. So I was a successful writer on day one because I was doing what I dreamed of doing. And then as the career continued and I had some good fortune and some good luck and was able to win some awards, the definition of success changes. But I always try and keep it, you know, a lot of my definition within grasp, and then these, beautiful things way up there that you kind of strive for. And that I think has really helped keep me balanced in my career and always achieving some level of success, because that just makes you feel good.
Now, over your journey, being a writer, did you like go back to school to do it, or did they come naturally to you?
Mhm. Yeah, well, it's the latter, I guess. I hope. It would have made sense that I would have taken some courses or tried to find ways to learn about writing, and I was just so sure that this was something that I could do, either rightly or wrongly at that point. And I had the passion ever since I was a small kid. And I don't know if the same is for you, JF, but I knew I wanted to write since I was probably 10, 12 years
Hmm.
old. So it was always inside of me.
Hmm.
So by time I gave myself the permission to do it full time, it was just I was ready to go. And I think part of me was thinking, okay, you'll try writing a manuscript or two, and then when nobody wants to publish it, I'll realize where my weaknesses are. And I thought at that point, then I'll go back and take some classes and really figure out how to do it. But I had the good fortune that the path to publishing was pretty quick for me.
So you found an agent? Is that how it works, or?
No, well, I mean, that is the way it can work. It's, you after I wrote my first manuscript, I sent it out to tons of agents and tons of publishers. And, you know, the first manuscript that I wrote really reflects the fact of a big piece of advice that I give writers today, new writers, when they ask me for advice. And the first piece I give them is be open to the possibility that you are not the type of writer that you think you're going to be. And that first manuscript that I wrote after leaving my job was a very serious thriller. And I was certain that's the kind of writer I was going to be. And I wrote that manuscript and I sent it out to all these publishers and agents and waited for my $1 million contract. But in the meantime, what do? You got to just keep on writing. And I thought, well, what am I going to do while I'm waiting? And I thought, well, I'm just going to write for the fun of it. And I've always loved mysteries in every form, whether it's in book or TV or movie. And I, went back to that old piece of advice, write what you know. And so I wrote this first Russell Quant mysteries, and I had just a blast writing that book. And I had so much fun, and it just came pouring out of me. And then when it was done, still hadn't gotten that $1 million contract for my serious thriller. And I thought, well, I guess I'll send this out as well. And JF, I was so sure that wasn't going to be my path to a writing career that I put this ridiculous nom de plume on that manuscript and just sent it out.
Mhm.
And immediately my mailbox was filled with letters addressed to this crazy nom de plume, and everybody was interested in this, somewhat humorous mystery novel based in Saskatchewan. And that was my path. It really it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, but when I hit on what was true to me as a writer, the you know the publishing contract was quick to follow. It was, way back then I had heard the stat that for every first time writer who gets a contract, and for every one of us, there's 1,000 who never get that contract,
Mm.
unfortunately, that it's at least a 6-year period from when you first start writing to when you get published. And for me, it was about 3 years before my book was hit the shelf. So it felt really good, and it felt quick to me.
So a lot of the awards that you've won is to do with crime writing. Can you tell us a little bit about the genre and why do you do it?
Yeah, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, when I decided to write the second manuscript and was thinking about what do I like as a reader rather than thinking about what I thought I wanted to do as a writer, I quickly fell into the crime genre because I had loved it for so long. And one of my mentors and a writer who I just had loved so long is a writer by the name of Gail Bowen, and she is also a Saskatchewan writer. And I remember walking into a bookstore here in Saskatoon and coming upon her book, and I didn't know her at that time. And I picked it up and I turned it in the back and read about it. And it was a book set in Saskatchewan. It was a mystery. And she was making a success of it. And it was my first inkling that maybe I could do this too, that what I thought might be impossible is possible. And that was my first entry into the world of writing crime in Canada. And I started to do a lot of research into who was doing this. And the Canadian crime writing field isn't very big. There aren't a lot of writers who are doing it. And particularly, this was 20 years ago, many fewer than are doing it today. And I knew, having spent time in libraries and bookstores and looking at, just the sheer volume of books that are out there, and thinking, how can I, an unknown, untested writer living in Saskatchewan, make a mark for myself? And I started thinking, that could be one of the ways, like to write a mystery set in Saskatchewan. Almost no one was doing it. And I thought, aha, like maybe this is my key. Maybe this is my entry into this career.
Now, what do you draw for inspiration? Like, do you look at real life events or historical cases when you write your book?
Yeah, my inspiration comes varied from varied sources. You know, it'll be actually, I was at an event the other day and someone had asked me the same question. I said, well, just talking to you is inspiration for me.
Oh
And
no,
truly,
the
yes.
true
So
crime,
watch
true
out,
crime. Oh
JF. You may end up in the next book, and who knows? I may have to kill you in chapter one because that's what I do. But it is true. Like as I'm out and about in the world, I think the way my brain works is that things just get seeded into some little part of my brain. And it can be years later when I'm writing a scene and I'm thinking of a character and I'll think of, well, kind of remember how that person at that event, how they wore their hair or how they expressed themselves or what their view of life was, and I'll start working that into a story. So that's certainly one part of inspiration. Another is real life, and particularly with the trilogy that I'm working on now, I use a lot of things that have appeared in the news, particularly locally and provincially, and I will use those as seeds to kind of sprout the story that I want to tell that has some important consequences for either the group that is affected or the city that's affected. um, you know it, it's it's tricky to write about true crime, and that's not at all what I
no.
do. And I find some freedom in taking just little bits and pieces that I find interesting in news stories and creating fiction out of them. And I think there's power in that because whenever you use some truth, be it something you read in the newspaper or some person that you met at a party, that really helps you to create scenes and characters that feel real to the reader.
So, what are some of the tips or tricks to make a character seem more multidimensional in your books, do you think? Like, I think
Mhm.
you use a lot of observation, as you discussed. That's one thing.
Yes.
Um, but like when
Yeah,
you create
totally.
a character, how do you make it real, I guess?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, JF. My books are very character heavy, and when I call myself a mystery writer, it's true. Almost all of my books are crime novels, but I it's something I battle with when I'm writing my books because I love writing character so much that sometimes I can go overboard. So I always have to rein myself in that as I'm writing a book and telling the stories of the characters, that I have to remember I still have to pay attention to the crime. And that can be a bit of a chore sometimes, but you need to remember the core of why you're writing what you're writing. So with my characters, I create what I call character Bibles. So for any of my main characters, I write these, quite long stories really
Mhm.
about who they are from birth until the first day they appear in my book. And I need to know everything about
Mhm.
these people. And I would say probably 70 to 80% of what I write never shows up in the book, but I need to know it so that when I put that character in a situation, I know exactly how they're going to respond. And that I think really helps you to create real life and believable characters because if I know who they are and if I've done my job, I'll communicate that to the reader and they'll know who they are too. And there's a confidence that you have as a writer when you can do that. And then I think there's a confidence that the reader will have when they know that, okay, this writer is writing about these people as if they are real people. On the flip side of that, it's important to know when you don't know something about your character. And in my career, and I've written, my upcoming book is going to be my 15th. So I've written a few books, and every so often there will be that situation where I will put my character have them deal with something that I didn't know about, that is not in that Bible, that is not something that I am familiar with. And those have been some of my best writing experiences because I know enough about them to know that I don't know what to do next with them. And those parts of writing are things that I think writers shouldn't shy away from. Just admit that I don't know. And these tends to be, especially in crime novels, with my one character, Russell Quant, who was my first series. And he was someone who always dealt with serious things by trying to find the funny and the lightheartedness. And I had put him in a situation where he had been physically and very nearly sexually abused and attacked. I I had no reference point for that or from myself or for him as a character. And it was a struggle for me to write those pages, but it was probably some of the best writing that I've done. And I got through it and I got him through it. So I think I was only able to do that because I knew those characters so well. So I mean that, in short form, that would be my answer to you. For anyone who is, a main character or a strong subsidiary character, really get to know them, spend time with them before you even think about putting them on the
Hmm.
page.
So, what's the hardest part of writing a book for you?
I would say the hardest part is knowing when to let it go. And that's somewhat from a technical perspective. With writing, I'm the kind of writer who I write in drafts, and before I send it into my publisher and my editor, I want that manuscript to be the best possible manuscript that I can create. And my goal is always that the editor will call me up and say, Anthony, it's perfect. You don't have to make any changes. That I'll tell everybody never, ever, ever, ever happens. But that's my goal.
Yeah.
uh, and so I will write and rewrite and rewrite. And eventually, though, you need to know when to let it go, when to know that you've done your best, and you can make changes forever. It's never going to be perfect, but at a certain point, you have to hand it over to fresh eyes who will give you a perspective that at that point you're no longer able to give yourself. You're too close to it. And very early in my career, I think when the editor's notes came back for my first book, I was just shocked. I thought, like, why don't they love my baby and why are they asking for these changes? But I very quickly, fortunately, came to understand that that relationship with an editor is probably one of the most important relationships a writer has. And when I realized that we both have the same goal, which is to put out the best book possible, then suddenly I completely changed my mindset and realized that I need to welcome these edits and these changes. And I've learned for myself, at least, when the editor's notes come to me, I will read them and then I put them away for a certain period of time just to allow the steam to,
Mhm.
to settle from coming out of my ears. And then I spend time thinking about what they've said. And I put the comments in two categories. One are the ones that I completely agree with and think, yeah, no, that there you're right. That has to be changed, or this needs to be, maybe uh, just you know changed it a little bit. Whatever it is that we're asking. And then on the other side are items that I think are worth discussion and maybe argument. And by argument, I mean that in the best way, where we need to have a back and forth and let's challenge me, like you're asking me, why did you write it this way? I've got a reason and I want to share that with you. And those are really wonderful conversations to have. And in the end, I have never ever felt that that editing process is anything but perfection, because in the end you end up with a much better product.
Now, do you ever get writer's block?
Mm. You know, I used to tell people that I never got writer's block. And it was true, I didn't, until, and this is something that I learned about myself as a writer. So several years ago, I lost my sister, which was a big deal.
Sorry.
And thank you. What I learned about myself as a writer is that I need to write from joy.
Hmm.
And even if I'm writing crime and about things that aren't joyful, for myself personally, I need to be in a joyful part of my life. I'm a born optimist. I'm a very positive person. And when I found myself in that situation where joy was hard to come by, I couldn't write. And it
Oh,
was,
yeah. I mean, I understand. Like, same thing when my dad died. I didn't write for a few years after that. It's just
yeah,
too hard.
yeah. Okay, well, you understand that. And it was surprising to me. And it took me a long time to find that place inside of myself where I could write again. And at the end of the day, what came out of it was something wonderful, which was a book I wrote called Going to Beautiful, and which ended up winning, Crime Writers of Canada Best Crime Novel. And that is a book that begins in tragedy, but then ends up in joy. And it really was a reflection of where I was coming from personally and as a writer.
Thank you very much for sharing all your tips.
Yeah.
Anthony, you're going to do a book reading for us. Can you tell us what you're reading and give us a little bit of context before you start?
Okay, sure. Now, the book is called Home Fires Burn, and it's the third book in a trilogy featuring a private investigator named Mary Bell. Home Fires Burn starts with two prologues, which is a little unusual, at least for me, because I rarely use prologues. So today I thought it'd be interesting to read you short excerpts from each of those prologues because they each service the beginning of the book in very different ways. So the first prologue speaks to the core of this book as a mystery novel. It introduces what's going to be the central mystery of the book. And it's about a man named John Watley, who is in what is probably one of the most devastating situations someone can be in when they live in Saskatchewan. It is the middle of winter, it's the middle of night, and he's on a desolate country road and he has found himself locked out of his vehicle. And he's done everything he can think of to get in, including beating it with a fence post. John gazed down at his bloody, raw hands. Curlicues of peeling skin had frozen and snapped off, falling into a crimson mound of snow and wood shards, all that was left of the fence post. The car's windows and doors, even its hood and trunk, scratched and dented but otherwise intact, had all been subjected to a brutal beating. Turning his back on the cruelly impenetrable vehicle, John allowed his body to flag, using the solidity of the car's frame to hold himself up while he tried to catch his ragged breath. The intense, violent effort had caused him to sweat profusely. As he'd grown hotter, he'd torn the scarf from his neck and tossed it to the ground. He now considered retrieving it, but the effort seemed Herculean. He needed rest, but there was no time for rest. John Watley was not done for. There was still hope. He had to keep moving. Constant movement would stave off the conditions intent on killing him, at least until he found help or a place to shelter. Now, the Saskatchewan countryside is littered with homesteads, grain storage units, even an abandoned farmyard would do. He just had to find one, just one. Then he could get out of the cold, out of the wind, out of death's grasp. And if he couldn't find shelter, if no one came for him, then he would damn well keep moving until he reached the city of living sky, until he found his way home. He was in a challenging situation. He could admit that much. But he also knew, without doubt, that the same persistence that had served him so well in building a successful business would serve him now, too. Gingerly, he crouched down and reached out to reclaim the scarf, tugging to free it from where the warmth of his sweat had caused the fabric to freeze to the ground. Refastening it for optimum protection and more determined than ever, John buried his battered hands within the pockets of his jacket and stamped his boots to loosen the treads of snow. As he collected himself, an unwelcome, stubborn truth emerged in his brain like a mind thistle. On average, 15 people die from hypothermia in Saskatchewan every year. It's a grim statistic that most people in the province are very well aware of, having heard it over and over again throughout their lives. In the past, John would scoff at the warnings, thinking to himself, what idiot living in Saskatchewan wouldn't have the common sense to be prepared? Shivering in the remote darkness, he grumbled out loud, idiot, meet John. John, meet idiot. Idiot or not, people needed him. He'd been a good man, helped a great many people. He'd lived a good life. He most certainly did not deserve to have it end this way. So it was with surprise when, after wiping up a buildup of delicate snowflakes that had somehow landed on his face, John looked up and saw the unexpected. On the horizon, a diffused halo. It was living sky. He'd obviously made excellent progress. He would swear the twinkling skyline was not even there a few seconds ago. The city was closer than he dared hope. His plan was working. Now, John noted that his limbs felt a bit sluggish, but fortunately, the cold had become less of an issue as time had passed. Probably knowing his horrific dilemma would soon be over was helping his body withstand the elements. Hope was a powerful thing. Never forget that, he told himself. With more effort than he expected he'd need, John urged his torso to move. I mean, if he was going to assess his progress, he'd need to turn around and look behind him to find where his car was in the distance, if it was even still visible. But strangely, his body resisted. Instead of moving forward, it rolled slowly, cumbersomely, rotating until it wedged itself into a crook of something big and solid. What the? John's confusion turned to surprise, then shock, then back to surprise. In that horrible moment, he realized he wasn't on the road halfway to living sky. He wasn't even upright. He was on the ground, cheek and jowl flattened against icy snow, lying next to his car. So I'm going to leave prologue 1 there. Prologue 2 speaks to the heart of the book, as it tells the story of our lead character, Private Detective Mary Bell, who is navigating the world as a transgender woman who has just returned to her hometown of Living Sky. And she's been back for a few months and she's been struggling with deciding whether or not she wants to reestablish contact with the family that she left behind. So prologue 2 begins with her very first phone call with her father. Hi, Dad, it's me. Mary heard a sharp intake of breath. She could imagine her father, Samuel Zvonek, standing in their kitchen next to the wall-mounted SaskTel telephone, probably one of the last of its kind outside of a museum. She wondered if Teresa, her mother, was nearby. What would her reaction be? Would she insist he hang up? It's you? His voice was barely more than a croak, but immediately heartbreakingly familiar. Until that moment, Mary didn't know how much she'd missed hearing it. Yes, she found herself struggling to hold back tears. Now, where did those come from? How are you? She asked. Are you okay? Another beat of silence. He was going to need time to register and accept what was happening. Mary did the quick math. Her father was now 77. Her mom would be 68. And my God, that matters. Her sister Isabel was 33. My parents are old. Maybe this is too much for him. Maybe I should hang up. Never mind me, he asked. How are you? Are you good? Are you safe? Where are you, Joey? Mary flinched at the sound of her old name, a name long gone, never really part of who she was, even back then. Her parents had given her a name that was never meant for her. It made sense, of course. They didn't know who she was now or then. How could they? It's Mary now, she told him. Mary. He hesitated, then whispered, Mary? She knew what he was thinking. She'd named herself after her beloved grandmother. Born on Christmas Day, her parents had called her Mary with an E instead of the more conventional Mary with an A. Grandma Mary was the only person who saw her grandchild for who she really was, maybe even before Mary did herself. She told her she was perfect and that everything would be okay, even though they both knew that wasn't true. Yes, Mary whispered back. I'm Mary with an E, just like Grandma. My full name is Mary Bell. Likely surprising himself as much as Mary, Samuel chuckled, and Mary knew why. Bell was the English translation of her original Ukrainian last name, Zvonek. Her father would appreciate that. It meant that even though she'd left Joey Zvonek behind, she'd intentionally maintained a tie to the family name he'd given her. Mary Bell. He tried the name on for size, repeating it twice more. Yep, that's me, Mary tried for a lighter tone, anxious to cut through the mire of whatever it was they were both feeling. It was just something so real and visceral. She could feel it as sure as the sweat on her brow. After another measured silence, he said, You didn't tell me. Are you all right? Are you safe? Yes, Papa, I'm safe. Papa. She hadn't used that term in forever. The word had come out easily, but scratched her throat as it did. Papa had been what she'd called her father in times of playfulness, times of affection. But she wasn't feeling playful or affectionate. Why had she used it now, after all they'd been through, after all she'd been through, after what her father had done and failed to do? You would tell me if you weren't, he said. What business is it of yours? Why do you care? You lost any right to knowing me or how I'm doing the day I walked out that front door. Those words, the recriminations, the weapons flashed through Mary's mind with a blazing sharpness and flash of pain so intense it almost took her breath away. Thankfully, or not, none of them made it past her lips. Instead, she said, I'm good. Very good, actually. I just wanted to call and tell you I'm alive. Goodbye, Dad. Said. There we
Thanks.
have it. The first two excerpts from the two prologues that begin Home Fires Burn.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
It's been my great pleasure. Thanks, JF.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarage.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by JF Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.